Fab. So welcome everybody. And just to say that our ways of working are that we will respect and listen to one another. We're going to contribute in that same spirit. We want to hopefully ensure that one of us speaks at any one time. And that means that when we're in our breakout rooms, that's how we're going to do some good listening. That we want to give everybody the opportunity to talk, whether that's in breakout rooms, just give people that chance to speak, and also to think about the fact that some people may be joining us on the phone or on an iPad in a different setting. Not all of us are perhaps at desks or in a working space, so let's remember one another's circumstances, and that there is confidentiality within this meeting, so whenever you disclose something, bear in mind though that it may not remain confidential. So although we have a high value on that, please think before you share something, because obviously this event is being recorded and other people may get to watch it. So just a little mention about that. And that obviously we want to hopefully support and encourage you in your learning and just help you to feel equipped in what you're doing as well, and that we want to be sharing the good practice of what we're learning this evening as well. So during the course of walking together, please do pop questions into the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on that. And just to say that the team, the four of us who are helping make this happen are Carla, myself, Abby and Tiz. And hopefully you can see us because we're going to give you a quick little wave. Abby just did that already. And we're the team who are working across the connection to do this learning with you. So I'm going to hand over now to Tiz.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, welcome along again. I'm going to do a little. I'm not going to share much words of wisdom from myself. You'll be pleased to know right now. I'm going to share a little video that hopefully will explain some of the wording behind generational theory. So you may have heard phrases like baby boomers or millennials or Gen X or whatever. So we're going to just show a video. Now, we've had a good look. The videos we found are American, so they have American references. And it was a bit of a toss-up today. Basically, do we want to learn how Batman is viewed through generations or in another way? So I'm going to share a different video. We'll send out some links to a couple of YouTube videos after this. So apologies, you have to kind of contextualize it a bit, but I think some of the overriding news stories that they pick up on, you'll be familiar with. So let me share this and go from there. Oh, that's just a very brief overview. There's more of that video and we'll send it out in the link to you later. Obviously, those of you who know where your birth certificates are, when you go and find your birth certificate, you won't see stamped on there anything that says you're a millennial or whatever. That kind of is a theory. It's kind of understanding that these generations, how different times really help shape us. Now, if you're like me, you may be a cusper, i.e. somebody who was born around the turning point. If you want to know, I'm a cusper between baby boomer and Gen X, not the silent and the greatest generations that some of my old young people used to accuse me of being. So there you go. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a flavor of when we're talking about generations, that's some of the generational theory behind that. And now Abby's going to come and send us off, I think.
Thanks, Tiz. If you were disappointed when Tiz said he's not sharing his words of wisdom, don't worry, the words of wisdom are coming, just not at that particular moment. We're going to do a couple of rapid fire questions using the chat. So if you haven't got the chat open, you might just want to open that on the side of your screen. And we've got 3 questions for you, really simple questions. I'm going to tell you all 3 of them just in case it helps you just to think about them a little bit in advance, and then we'll go through one by one. But the 3 questions we're going to ask you are, what are the generations in your church? The second is, what generations are missing from your church? And then the third question is, does your church reflect your wider community? So are the generations that are in your church and missing from your church, would that be true of your wider community as well? However you define wider communities, that might be your village, it might be your city, entirely up to you. So question number 1, what generations are in your church? And you can pop these into the chat and you can use those formal names, or if you want to use age brackets, if that's easier for you, if you can't remember all of those different groupings, then you can do that, whatever way makes sense to you. I don't know that I can remember all of the list to remind you exactly which all of the age brackets were. Tiz, Gail, Carla, any of you know them off by heart, just while people are thinking about this?
I'm typing it in. Spelling mistakes are there for the benefit of those of you who don't have dyslexia.
Okay, so those are going to come in the chat, but you can, there we go. Greatest generation, the baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, that's me, Gen Z and Gen A. So which generations, which age groups are in your church?
Gen A weren't mentioned in the video. They're the youngest generation, so basically under 8s.
I can see lots of thinking faces as you all scan the faces you know from your congregations. Okay, so we've got a few things coming in. Kate says all but one. Oh, sorry, all but me are over 60, mostly ranging 60 to 80 years old. Great, thanks, Kate. Judy, baby boomers are missing. Tara, you think you've got every generation? Yeah, Donna the same. Danny. Sarah, lots of baby boomers and some of each of the other generations. Oh yes, Carla, thanks for that reminder. The silent generation were missing from Tiz's list between the greatest generation of baby boomers. Okay, older generation predominantly. Mostly over 60, very few under, yeah. Okay, so I think we're seeing a leaning towards the older generations as a general rule, but some people definitely saying they've got a spread. Thank you. Okay, if you're still typing on that one, keep typing, but if you've answered that one, we'll go on to our second question. Which generations then are missing? Some of you have already included that, but if you haven't yet, which generations are not in your churches? Again, if we go We're going to go back to front from the youngest. So we've got the youngest generation is Gen A, that's under 8-year-olds. Gen Z, who are sort of 1997 until 8 years ago, I suppose. What would that be?
2016.
Yeah,
Just
2016. Millennials, so that's kind of 80s and 90s. Gen X. Before that, I'm not a maths person.
Mid-60s.
Thank you, Des.
Like me.
So missing Generation X and younger, we've got very few aged 3 to 7 during Sundays. Missing Gen Z and below. Fewer baby boomers. One person's put, thanks, Tara. Sue, we're missing the later teens and the 20 to 50s. Donna, less Gen A and Z than others. Oh, thanks, Carla. There's the full list from Carla there of all the years and ages. On Sundays, we have very few under 11s, but during the weekdays, we have those ages using the church premises. Oh, excellent. You're a step ahead of us. That's a good answer. Thank you. Yeah, Kate and Kate both saying sort of anyone under 50, 55. All right, thanks. So that third question then, is your church reflecting your wider community? Are the groups that are in your church and the groups that are missing from your church the same as the groups that are in and missing from your wider community, or is there a difference? Might be a slightly harder question to answer, depends how much you know about your community. Do you know the demographics of your village, your town, your city? And don't worry too much if you don't, just have a stab at it. Well, what would be your best guess if you go to Tesco on a Saturday morning? Do the ages you see there reflect the same ages you see in your church or any other supermarket? Tesco just happens to be what I have. Okay, there's a couple of people saying definitely a difference. Yeah, Joanne, the wider community are using our building, but only on the fringes of church. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Jenny, lots of student housing, but only 4 students in the church. Yeah, okay, big difference there. Judy, all the other local churches are mostly baby boomers and older. That's interesting to think about the other churches in our areas as well. Yeah, interesting. Okay, thanks everyone for those responses. If you're still typing, then please do keep putting them in. We're going to come back to these questions and why we've asked these questions and what we can do with the answers that we've just come up with towards the end of this session. But right now, I'm going to hand back to Tiz for those words of wisdom.
Yeah, thank you. I've set myself up now, haven't I? So I'm going to share a few slides so you don't have to look at my face too much. So as we go through this, so that's just from the beginning of the video. A generation typically refers to a group of people born with a certain period of time whose shared age and experiences shape their distinctive worldview. And I think that is helpful to kind of bear in mind when we're thinking a bit about why this could be helpful, is this the stories we tell ourselves and what stories we've experienced in life often shape how we respond to the world around us. So yeah, so that's kind of, and therefore why we need to understand something around intergenerational thinking in our ministry. So in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verses 4 to 9, you may be really familiar with this. I'm not going to read it all out, but for me this is a key text for us in all sorts of ways. But it's in verse 7. I'm just going to pick out: repeat them again and again to your children, talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you're going to bed and when you are getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders, write them on the doorposts of your houses and on your gates. And it's, for me, there's something in there around this storytelling and repeating them again and again to your children. This idea that it's our story to pass on. We're involved in the passing on of the story. Now, some of you, most of you won't know who I am, but for a while in my life, I did a lot of youth work, and I used to think I was there, sitting there, passing on these words of wisdom that I still can't find. And now, as I do that, I realize that in doing some of that, as I told the stories, the young people helped me to grapple with the stories better myself. There was something, it wasn't a one-way, it wasn't just a downward thing, it was a spiral. It was, as I told the story got honed in my head better, if that makes sense. Does that, so that's kind of, for me, there's a real importance about that. Because at its heart, there's something around this mutuality. Oh, I can't even say the word. Mutuality. We are all children of God. I was at a messy church yesterday, and they were talking about this idea that we're all part of God's family. And the person who did the talk was sharing that God didn't have any grandchildren, and you could just hear these children go, well, how's that? You're older than I am. You could hear the cogs turning in their heads. But there's something about, in faith, that we're all children of God. There's something wonderful about that. And in this intergenerational context, it can be useful to remember that our younger brothers and sisters and our older brothers and sisters, we are all sisters and brothers together. So there is a sense of mutuality in that. I really love this picture. I spend way too much time in my life looking on websites for pictures, but there's something about creating the space so that we all get to use the gifts that God has given us. And I think there's something about that like I said, when I did some youth work, when you see a young person outstrip you, get better at something than you can do, there's a wonderful feeling in that. But equally, I think there's something about listening and allowing some older people to do that as well, and how we create spaces together where you might have somebody who's really good at something and give them space to share that with somebody else, whether it be baking or artwork or worship leading or whatever, create the spaces that can be really helpful. We all grow when we allow people to use their gifts. It can be a bit dangerous, and dare I say, sometimes the Methodist Church, we do like to have a rhythm, and we do like it all to be nicely lined up. But I think there's something about we then box people in potentially, and we don't allow them to grow their gifts. So sometimes you've got to create space. I think there's something around being a safety net when people try to preach for the first time or try to lead worship for the first time. You've got to allow that kind of whatever that is. We all grow when people are allowed to grow their gifts, use their gifts. And finally, I think there's something around that by being intergenerational, it seeks out contributions that everyone can make regardless of age. It's so important for us to understand that we are all made in the image of God. We all bear something of God's image, and that can be the youngest child or the oldest adult, that we can all contribute, we can all help. And in doing that, we can impact cross generations in different ways. I was privileged a few years ago to lead a group in Uganda, and our oldest member of the team was 69, and the youngest was 14, and they had a particular interest in music together, and together they really inspired each other to be better at it. And I think there's a really interesting bit around seeking out these contributions that everybody can make. So hopefully that's given you a few thoughts to think about why this intergenerational stuff is worth pursuing and grappling with. I think we're going to, am I heading back to you now, Abby, and you're going to put us into breakout rooms, or is it Gail? I've lost my bit of paper.
Thank you, Tiz. That's really helpful. Folks, we're going to have some time for conversations in breakout rooms now. We've got a couple of questions that we would like you to mull over, and they centre around that idea of mutuality. So that sense of us being God's people all together, and how do we kind of encourage and sort of support one another in the midst of that, as Tiz was talking about. So the first question is, how do we ensure better mutuality? So what might that look like in our church? So think about your own setting. What might that involve for where you're based? Because all of this does depend on the context that we're in. And then the second question is, what is the cost, but also the benefits and joys of mutuality? So if we're working towards becoming that community of different ages, all working and worshipping together, how might we all benefit from that? But also, what costs might there be? So have a think, mull those things over, wrestle with them a little bit. You might not reach answers, but just have some really good conversations with one another now, and we'll see you back here shortly. Hi, everyone. Welcome back again. We hope you had some good conversations there. We're really interested to hear some of your thoughts and reflections, and you can use the chat again to type in these things. So we're just interested to hear your reflections on the idea of mutuality. How can we do it better? And perhaps what were some of the costs or benefits that you thought about? So feel free to put a phrase, a word, maybe there is a headline for the conversation you had that you just want to type in, and we just want to reflect on those things. So start typing that in now. Okay, so Errol said about mutual respect. Tara says she's not sure about the word mutuality. Tara, do you mean in terms of understanding the word, or how that perhaps translates into a church setting?
Yeah, how it translates into the intergenerational. Yeah, I probably need to think about it a bit longer.
Want water?
Okay.
What? Okay.
Let's have a little look.
Can I give an example for Tara, just while other people are typing? So towards the start of the COVID lockdowns, I was leading a small group. So we were meeting online, and we had a 16-year-old and a 60-year-old in this group, amongst others. And I really vividly remember a conversation. So the whole small group, we were doing a short, I think it was about 10 weeks together, all on different issues of justice. So every week we looked at a different issue. And for me, the mutuality in that was that 16-year-old and that 60-year-old, it wasn't just that they both shared their thoughts, it was that there was a respect from each, that they had different life experiences that brought different perspectives to the question that we were looking at that week, the issue that we were looking at. And that they were both able to reflect on what the other had said and acknowledge that there was a truth in what they were saying, even if it was different to their own experiences, their own perspectives on the issue. And so that for me was the mutuality of not just listening to each other, but listening to each other, if that makes sense.
There's a difference, isn't there, between hearing and listening, I think. So that attentive listening is really taking on board what someone is saying. I get that. So some other comments that I'll just read out. That was a great example, Abby. Thanks for sharing that. Including all ages in serving and participating in services and activities. I think part of that means recognizing that people may do things differently. They may make suggestions about doing things differently. Are we open to that? Are we willing to explore that? Do we make it easy for people to express that if they think that there might be a different way? And Donna says about quite a lot of support during the week from different generations on Facebook. That is fascinating, that social media can be a tool for different generations connecting with each other and supporting. And let's just keep on reading. Yes, that sense of mutual respect. Okay.
I think Ray makes an interesting point about it might involve, I think this is what you're saying, Ray, it may involve some sacrifice. One generation might feel that it has to sacrifice something for another generation.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're hinting at.
Yeah, that's
which
right.
I think we do have to think about the cost for some to do that for others. So there's something about that. So thank you, Ray, for that.
Yeah. And Kate says about trying to get past the fact about church, trying to get past that church is just Sunday, getting a crossover. So what I understand that you're saying there is about actually how we're trying to sort of look at church community as extending kind of through the course of the week, perhaps, and how it's not just solely focused perhaps on a service. Am I understanding you right, Kate? There's something I feel that's sort of being reflected in some of your comments, which is that sense of actually how we're relating to one another as people of different ages, and that need for us to be respectful, that need to be inviting and welcoming of everybody's contributions, and also actually that may then mean that it needs to change or something new. And for some of us that might be challenging. So how do we help ourselves with that? How do we as a church manage that when it happens? Because it's very easy to default to the way that things have always been done. How do we sort of make room for that? So and then Aryl's comment, one of our group members mentioned that to organise a space for everyone together, then all help in setting up and tidying up, be intentionally participative. Excellent. Yes. There is something about the doing of stuff together which I think can make a really big difference. And if we kind of all engaged in that on an equal footing, it can be really good for all of us just to sort of play our part. That's something that I experienced very much so at 3 Generate. I was in the 4 to 7s venue, and it was great to see at different points in the day that we spent together that we had parents, carers, adults, the team joining in to help kind of tidy up a bit, put things away, get the venue ready for another activity. And actually there was just a really good kind of community hubbub going on around the venue as we were doing that together, and actually we enjoyed it, which I think was a bit of a surprise to some of us, but it was really great. Thank you for your comments. Abby is going to just bring us a few closing thoughts now.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. So we are almost at the end of our time already. It has flown by, but we want to talk briefly. We want to go back to those questions we asked you about the generations that are in your church and in your community. Because we're going to set you a little bit of homework, because, you know, we're talking about being intergenerational. So let's all put ourselves into the mindset of being school age once again and do a little bit of homework. Or if you want to think of it as an exciting, fun challenge, if that helps, you can do that as well. Because when we come back together again, and hopefully you're going to come back for session 3, which is on the 8th of December, we're going to be thinking a bit more missionally and getting you all to share a bit more about your context, your churches and communities, what you're doing, what you would like to be doing. So sorry, just reading Kate's comment. Do we get one of the badges launched at conference? If I could give you a badge through the screen, Kate, I would give you a badge. Haven't quite worked out how to do it through Zoom yet. But so before we come together, because we want to talk about this mission, we would love you to do a bit more of a deep dive into those questions around the generations present in your church and in your community, and how you and your church can be engaging them in different ways, new ways, exciting ways, perhaps continuing some of the ideas that you're already doing and putting them into different contexts, remembering what Tiz was saying, that God has given every single one of us gifts. We all have something to offer, no matter how old, how young we might be. So we're going to send you after this evening a kind of quite kind of simple reflection piece that just has those questions again about who's in your church, who's in your community, how can you engage with these groups, just for you. And maybe you could do this with a couple of other people in your church as well to fill this in. Ideally, get some people from different generations together, fill this in together. Wouldn't that be exciting? And then convince them to come along to the next session. But if you're not sure who that would be, you can just do it on your own and just fill in some of those questions. And we really encourage you to think outside the box a little bit. Someone said right at the start about, well, we have these people on a Sunday, but during the week, we have these other people. And that's what we want you to think about when you think about who is part of your church. Think broadly. Think about the family members of the people who are in your Sunday services. Think about the people who are hiring your church hall in the week. When you think about your community, think about the school down the road or the care home, whatever it might be. And then, as I said, think about how we can be engaging them in a way which is encouraging everyone to explore the gifts that God has given them. If it's helpful, you might want to think about using a Methodist way of life as a framework to help you to think about this. If you haven't come across it before, a Methodist way of life is a way to live out the Methodist calling of living out our discipleship in worship and mission. And it offers 12 practices of being a follower of Jesus. Things that kind of we would all say, yes, we think this is what it means to follow Jesus. Things like praying, worshiping, challenging injustice, telling other people about Jesus, caring for our neighbours, serving people around us, 12 different commitments that can help us to think about, well, who do we know who is particularly passionate about prayer? Who do we know who is really gifted in challenging injustice? And how do we encourage those particular gifts in those particular people? So if that's helpful to you, I'm popping a link in the chat, but we'll send this to you as well afterwards, so you can have a look at those commitments and practices and see if that's a helpful way of thinking about this. And then bring those to the session on the 8th of December, where, as I said, we'll be giving more space and time for all of you to be sharing together about your churches and communities. And we're going to be joined by Emma Nash, who is the Mission and Community Engagement Officer in the Evangelism and Growth team. That's the team that I'm part of as well. And she will share a little bit about her work in mission and how we can think about being intergenerational in our mission. Final thing from me, and then we will release you into your evenings. This is the second of 3 sessions, but we are just starting to think about doing a 4th session. 22nd of March is the kind of tentative date, so it's not for a few months yet. And the idea of that would be that if you would like to come along and you would like to share some of what you've been up to since these sessions, come and tell us what you've been doing, share stories with one another, get a little bit of kind of input, encouragement, brings a question you might have, something maybe that isn't going quite right that you'd love to get a bit of advice on. We're kind of very much, this is an idea we had about 2 days ago, so we're very much kind of want to make that session work for all of you. So if that is something that you think might be of interest to you, we're not, this is not a commitment that we're going to come bang on your doors if you're not there, but if this is something you think might be of interest, could you just either use the reactions buttons, if you know where those are at the bottom of your screen, and give us a thumbs up, or if you want to just pop into the chat a yes or a no, just so that we have a kind of rough idea of whether that kind of a session would be of interest. can see a few thumbs up there. Thank you. If you don't want to say no to the whole group, but you want to private message myself or Tiz or Gail, Carla, and say, no, don't think I'd be interested in that, that's absolutely fine as well. Oh, we've got a heart there. Wow, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And in the chat, wish my whole church congregation attended this. I mean, genuinely, we would love the next session if you can encourage 1 or 2 more people to come along with you, particularly if you've done that reflection piece together, so that it's starting to spread through your church. That would be fantastic. And yeah, you can always share the recording. That's us kind of officially closed for this evening. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for sharing. I hope that's just given you a few thoughts, sparked some ideas to take away with you. If you do have any questions, we're going to stick around for sort of another 10 minutes. So if you want to stick around and ask those questions, please do. The link for the 8th of December, we will send an email round to everyone that will include the Zoom details. So you don't need to sign up again. We'll just send you the link directly, just to save you that. But do stick around if you've got any questions you'd like to ask of us. Otherwise, it's been lovely to see you all, and take care and have a fantastic weekend.